the WNBA, they look at these players like a joke. To be fair, why shouldn't they? These players are demanding 30% of league revenue prior to expenses being paid. The players that have never driven in viewership, the players that have never brought in attendance, the players that have never turned a profit.
That laugh says everything you need to know about where these negotiations stand right now. WNBA owners looking at player demands like it's a joke. And honestly, when you see what the players are actually asking for, you start to understand why the owners aren't even bothering to respond anymore. It's been a full month since the WNBA Players Association sent their latest proposal, 30 days. And the league's response? Radio silence. Not a counteroffer, not a rejection letter, nothing, because, according to league sources, the proposal wasn't different enough from the previous ones to warrant a response. They're literally waiting for the players to get serious.
Get done. In just over 100 days, on May 8th, the 2026 WNBA season is set to tip off with 3 games. Between now and then, the league needs to hold a 2-team expansion draft for the Portland Fire and Toronto Tempo. More than 100 unrestricted free agents need to sign contracts. And the 2026 rookies need to be drafted to their teams. Most importantly, the league and players need to agree on a collective bargaining agreement, a process 15 months in the making, since the players union decided to put out a hype tape, a hype video of them saying, "We deserve more. We're opting out." As the deadline passed on January 9th, the sides ushered in a period called status quo, where the conditions of the 2020 deal remain in effect.
January 9th, 2025. That was the deadline. The moment the old collective bargaining agreement officially expired, and both sides entered what's called status quo, where the 2020 deal stays in effect while they figure this out. But here's what makes this different from every other sports labor negotiation you've seen. The season is supposed to start May 8th. 3 games on opening night, and between now and then, they need to hold an expansion draft for Portland and Toronto, sign over 100 unrestricted free agents, and draft the 2026 rookie class. The clock isn't just ticking, it's screaming. And the two sides aren't even talking to each other. This whole thing started 15 months ago when the players put out that hype video announcing they were opting out of the 2020 CBA. Remember that? All the stars lined up saying "we deserve more" in unison. It was coordinated, it was dramatic, and it set the tone for what everyone thought would be aggressive but productive negotiations. Instead, we're watching a stalemate that's starting to look less like negotiation and more like a game of chicken, where neither side will blink.
The league says no. The players send in that same proposal. The league says, you guys aren't serious. This had to be an accident, right? They mean to send over the same proposal that they just sent. So we'll wait for the real one. This is like, you ask a girl out, she says no. Then you come back and say, "Hey, you want to go to dinner?" It's totally not a date. Did I just tell you no? Oh, this is like the kid asking the parents, "Hey, can I get a toy?" No. "Hey, can I get a Lego?" Wait, didn't I just say you can't get a toy? But since you're changing the words from toy to Lego, now you think I'm suddenly gonna say yes?
That analogy hits different when you understand what's actually happening here. The players keep sending in the same proposal with minor tweaks, like a kid asking for a toy, getting told no, then immediately asking for a Lego instead, then asking for K'NEX, then asking for a Barbie, just changing the words while the fundamental ask stays exactly the same. And what is that fundamental ask? 30% of gross revenue, not net revenue, gross, before expenses, before the league pays for travel, housing, marketing, production costs, facility rentals, all of it. The players want their cut calculated before any of those bills get paid. Now compare that to what the owners are offering. 70% of net revenue averaged over the life of the agreement. That sounds lower, until you understand what net revenue means. That's after basic operating costs but before profit distribution. It's actually a significantly better deal than it appears on the surface, especially for a league that's operated at a loss for 28 consecutive years. 28 years. Not a typo. Nearly 3 decades of red ink.
A big part of the reason this stalemate is that the sides still do not see eye to eye on how revenue sharing will work under a new agreement. The league has proposed a system where players would receive on average 70% of net revenue over the lifetime of the agreement, while the players have proposed receiving 30% of gross revenue. Sources have indicated to ESPN that owners are unlikely to significant yield on the revenue sharing position, though there is wiggle room at the cost of other expenses they incur under the player's current proposal. The league has stated its priorities are not only to increase player compensation, but amid an opportunity to shift from decades of operating at a loss to sustained profitability, to also incentivize owners to continue investing. Decades of operating at a loss. Let me take a sip out of my coffee.
ESPN broke down 4 potential paths to get a deal done, and the first one cuts right to the heart of this. Both sides need to find mutual understanding on revenue sharing. Sounds obvious, right? Except they're not even speaking the same language. The players keep saying their 30% demand represents our value and is not too much. That's a direct quote from A'ja Wilson. But here's the reality check. Value in professional sports is determined by revenue generation. The NBA players get 50% of basketball-related income, because NBA basketball generates over $10 billion annually. The league is wildly profitable, so the players have leverage to demand a significant cut. The WNBA generated approximately $200 million in revenue in 2024. That's the best year in league history, driven almost entirely by the Caitlin Clark effect. Record attendance, record viewership, record merchandise sales. And even in that record-breaking year, most financial analysts estimate the league still operated at a loss when you account for all the subsidies from the NBA. So when A'ja Wilson says 30% of gross revenue represents their value, she's making that statement after exactly 2 years of respectable metrics. 2 years out of 28. And one of those years was almost entirely because of a single player who wasn't even in the league for the previous 27.
Quote, housing remains a priority for all, housing for all players remains priority, especially for those on non-guaranteed contracts and international players. One player told ESPN, but I think this is one of the toughest issues for the league for whatever reason. Now we compare this to others. The NFL, NBA, NHL, MLS, and MLB do not provide season-long housing for players. The NWSL has a plan to phase out team-provided housing by 2027. Now here we go. But that plan has stipulations for players who didn't have high salaries and or are in expensive markets. In a deal for the WNBA CBA, expect to see a similar type of compromise when it comes to salary and market variability.
Housing is where this gets really interesting, because it's the one area where you can actually see potential compromise forming. Every other major professional sports league, NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, MLS, none of them provide season-long housing for players. The NWSL is actively phasing out team-provided housing by 2027, though they're building in stipulations for players on lower salaries or in expensive markets. And that's exactly the framework the WNBA appears willing to adopt. Housing for players on non-guaranteed contracts. Housing for international players still getting acclimated. Housing for rookies on minimum deals in cities like New York or San Francisco, where rent could eat up half their salary. But veterans making $200,000 plus, star players on max contracts, you're buying your own house. One player told ESPN that housing remains a priority for all players, especially those on non-guaranteed contracts and international players, but this is one of the toughest issues for the league for whatever reason. For whatever reason. Like it's some mystery why a league that loses money every year might be hesitant to pay rent for millionaires. That quote reveals something crucial about how at least some players are thinking about this. There's an acknowledgement that tiered housing makes sense, that not everyone needs the same benefits, that compromise is possible here.
About the wins it appears to have even before the deal is done. The wins it appears to have even before the deal is done. Now this is why it's a tactic used in leagues like the NBA, the MLB, the NFL, because those leagues make money. Those leagues actually bring in billions of dollars. The WNBA brings in negative millions of dollars. They bring in millions, but just negative millions. So if you're a fan and you see that the NFL is getting, all these guys get paid way too much for me, to be honest. Like, these contracts are all absurd. But you could at least think and say, okay, well, if they say the league's making $100 billion, whatever the fucking number is, I don't know how much it is, $10 billion, who knows? Who knows with the NFL? Well, then you can say...
But then ESPN drops this paragraph that shows just how disconnected the strategy is. Sources outside the Players Association have told ESPN that the union might benefit by starting to talk more optimistically about the wins it appears to have even before the deal is done. Translation: stop acting like the owners are disrespecting you and start acknowledging the significant improvements they're offering. Because here's what the Players Association has been doing for months. Calling every proposal insulting, inadequate, disrespect, classic union negotiation tactics that work great when you have leverage. But do the WNBA players have leverage? In the NBA, if the players strike, the owners lose billions. The pressure is enormous to settle quickly. In the WNBA, if the players strike, the owners lose what exactly? A league that doesn't make them money anyway? The NBA will keep subsidizing the WNBA's existence because it's good for their brand, good for growing the game globally, good for their relationship with players who have daughters in the sport. The players are using negotiation tactics, borrowed from profitable leagues, and applying them to a league where those tactics don't create the same pressure. It's like bringing a playbook from a completely different sport and expecting the same result.
Leadership spilled into the public when Collier put the commissioner on blast during her 2025 exit interview. It was before there was a massive break of trust between the league and its players. It was before people watched this stuff. When you can lie to the 46,000 old fans and tell them things are much more hunky-dory than they really are. I guarantee you, if people were paying attention, like people, not drones, like people that actually think for themselves, we're actually watching this and we're following this deal as it goes. People, not shills that get paid to support, people that can think for themselves. They would say, wait, the WNBA, they're getting fleeced in this deal here. Wait, forget that. Why is the NBA still paying for a lot of this? Why is the NBA still helping you out so much? Maybe you guys should just go do your own thing. It was a different world back then, indeed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, that would mean so much to me.
Here's where it gets personal. The article points out that back in 2020, when Commissioner Cathy Engelbert and Union President Nneka Ogwumike announced the last CBA, they literally coordinated their outfits. Engelbert in a navy blue blazer, Ogwumike in a royal blue dress, standing side by side talking about collaboration and partnership and groundbreaking agreements supporting players long-term. That was before COVID destroyed the 2020 season. Before the bubble season, where player activism led to the forced sale of the Atlanta Dream. Before the 2022 capital raise that brought in new investors and complicated the ownership structure. Before Caitlin Clark's arrival exploded the sport's popularity. And critically, before Napheesa Collier publicly blasted Engelbert's leadership in her 2025 exit interview. The trust is gone. That collaborative spirit from 2020 where both sides dressed in blue and smiled for Good Morning America, dead. What we're watching now is a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between labor and management. And neither side seems interested in rebuilding it. And maybe that's the real issue. Maybe this isn't actually about the money at all. Maybe it's about respect, about recognition, about players who feel like they've been disrespected for 28 years. Finally having enough leverage to demand change. And maybe it's about owners who've subsidized losses for 28 years finally saying enough is enough. Show us the revenue growth is sustainable before we commit to massive salary increases.
See you next time, and as always, take it easy.
The arrival of Caitlin Clark changed everything. Not just the ratings and attendance, but the psychology of these negotiations. For the first time in league history, the players have seen what's possible. They've experienced sold-out arenas. They've watched their games draw 3 million viewers. They've seen their jerseys fly off the shelves. And that success has emboldened them in a way that's both understandable and potentially dangerous. Because all of that success is tied to one player, one generational talent, who drove interest in a way the league had never seen before. Remove Caitlin Clark from the equation, and do those numbers hold? Maybe. Maybe not. The 2025 season will tell us a lot, but the players are negotiating, like the 2024 success is the new baseline. Like that's the floor, not the ceiling. They're demanding 30% of gross revenue, based on 2 years of growth, one of which was almost entirely attributable to a single rookie. The owners are looking at the same data and seeing volatility, not stability. They're seeing a spike that needs to be sustained for several more years before it justifies the kind of financial commitment the players are demanding. They're thinking about what happens if Clark gets injured, or if casual fans who showed up for her don't stick around for the broader product. Two groups looking at the exact same numbers and drawing completely opposite conclusions about what they mean for the future. So here we are, May 8th approaching fast. Over 100 free agents in limbo, 2 expansion teams, waiting to build rosters, a draft that needs to happen, and the two sides aren't even responding to each other's proposals anymore. The league thinks the players are being unrealistic. The players think the league is being disrespectful. And neither side is willing to blink first, because they both think time is on their side. The owners figure the players will cave when they realize their paychecks are at risk. The players figure the owners will cave when they realize the momentum from 2024 could evaporate. Without a 2025 season, someone's wrong. We're about to find out. What's your take? Are the players overplaying their hand by demanding 30% of gross revenue? Or are the owners being cheap after finally seeing what this league can become? Because you can't have it both ways. Either the 2024 success justifies massive salary increases, or it doesn't. Pick a side in the comments.